I work the front desk at a Berlin hotel, and last Tuesday, an American checked in at 2:47 p.m. Our check-in time is 3 p.m. He arrived 13 minutes early, demanded his room immediately. When I explained he needed to wait, he said, "I'm here now. The room exists." "What's the problem?" I told him the room was being cleaned. He said, "So clean it faster." I explained, "We have scheduled cleaning times." He stared at me like I'd spoken backwards. In America, customer service means serving the customer when they arrive.
Oh.
I nodded. In Germany, customer service means following the schedule, so everyone gets served properly. He checked his watch every 40 seconds for 13 minutes. When 3 p.m. hit exactly, I handed him his key. He said, "See? That wasn't so hard." He didn't understand that's precisely how it was supposed to work. If cultural clarity like this fascinates you, this is what I decode every week. Subscribing simply keeps the insights arriving on time. My coworker in Munich once had an American show up at 6:03 a.m. for a 6 a.m. train. The doors had closed. He banged on the window. The conductor pointed at his watch and shook his head. The American yelled, 3 minutes. The conductor mouthed, "Exactly." A cafe owner in Hamburg told me an American arrived at 8:58 a.m. They opened at 9 a.m. He pulled the door. Locked. He knocked. The owner pointed at the sign. The American said, "I can see you in there." The owner pointed at his watch. At 9 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds a.m., he unlocked the door. The American said, "That was ridiculous." The owner said, "That was precise." These stories share one theme: Americans discovering that German punctuality isn't flexibilize the entire point. I drove a tour bus in Frankfurt, and an American family booked a 10 a.m. city tour. Our departure policy is clear: bus leaves at the scheduled time, no exceptions. At 9:58 a.m., I closed the doors and started the engine. At 9:59 a.m., they came running across the plaza, waving and shouting. At 10 a.m., I pulled away. They stood there, hands raised in disbelief. That afternoon, they found me at the depot. The father said, "You saw us." "We were right there," I said. "You were there at 9:59 a.m. The tour was at 10 a.m. He said, "1 minute. You couldn't wait 1 minute?" I explained that if I wait 1 minute for them, I wait 1 minute for everyone. And soon, the 10 a.m. tour leaves at 10:07 a.m., and the entire schedule collapses. He said, "But we paid." He said, "You paid for a 10 a.m. tour." That tour left at 10 a.m. He said this was the worst customer service he'd experienced. I said, "We have an 11 a.m. tour." Most people hear these stories and laugh. Subscribers understand what they reveal. If you like being the one who actually gets the world, you belong here. He asked if I'd wait if they were late to that one. I said no. They didn't book it. My friend manages a Stuttgart medical clinic. Appointments run exactly 15 minutes. An American arrived 12 minutes late for a 2 p.m. appointment. My friend said, "I'm sorry, but we've moved to the next patient." The American said, "I'm here now. I have an appointment." My friend said, "You had an appointment at 2 p.m. It's now to 12 p.m. The American explained there was traffic. My friend said, "That's why we recommend arriving early." The American said, "So you're telling me I drove all this way for nothing?" My friend said, "You drove all this way 12 minutes too late." The American demanded to see the doctor anyway. My friend explained the 2:15 p.m. patient was already in the room. The American said, "This is insane. In America, doctors run late all the time," my friend said. "In Germany, they don't," the American asked when the next available appointment was. My friend checked. "Next Tuesday, 2 p.m., the American said. "I'll be there at 1:55 p.m., my friend said. "Please don't arrive before 1:50 p.m. The previous patient will still be in the room." A grocery store in Cologne closes at 8 p.m. An American entered at 7:58 p.m. At 8 p.m., the manager announced, closing over the intercom. The American was in the frozen food aisle. At 8:02 p.m., the manager found him still shopping. She said, "Sir, we're closed," he said. "I'm almost done." She said, "We closed 2 minutes ago," he said. "But I'm already inside." She explained that being inside after closing doesn't change closing time. He said, "Just give me 5 minutes." She said, "I'll give you 2 minutes to check out. After that, I'm locking the doors." He said this was hostile. She said this was 8:04 p.m. He grabbed 3 items and rushed to the register. At 8:06 p.m., he was checking out. At 8:07 p.m., she locked the doors behind him. He stood outside and took a photo of her locking up, saying he'd report this. She waved. Report to whom? The Punctuality police. They'd give her a medal. I'm a therapist in Dusseldorf. Sessions are 50 minutes scheduled on the hour. An American patient arrived 15 minutes late to his 4 p.m. session. I greeted him at 4:15 p.m. and said we'd end at 4:50 p.m. as scheduled. He said, "Wait, so I only get 35 minutes?" I said, "The session time doesn't change because you arrived late." Said this wasn't fair. He was paying for 50 minutes. I explained he paid for a 4 p.m. to 4:50 p.m. session. How he uses that time is his choice. He said, "But I was late because of the train." Said, "Then we should discuss time management in your remaining 33 minutes. He said, "Can we extend to 5:05 p.m.? I said, "I have a 5 p.m. patient." Said, "So bump them back 15 minutes. I stared at him. "You want me to make my 5 p.m. patient late because you were late?" He said, "Just this once." I said, "If I do it for you, I do it for everyone. Then nobody has appointments. They have suggestions." He spent 10 minutes arguing about the fairness of punctuality. I said, "That's 10 fewer minutes for therapy." He said, "This is why Germans are so rigid." I said, "This is why Germans are so punctual." We have 23 minutes remaining. Hair salon in Leipzig has 30-minute haircut slots. An American booked 3:30 p.m. and arrived at 3:47 p.m. The stylist said, "I'm sorry, your slot has passed," the American said. "But I have an appointment," the stylist said. "You had an appointment 17 minutes ago." The American explained his hotel was farther than expected. The stylist said the distance didn't change. "Your arrival time did," the American said. "Can you squeeze me in?" The stylist said, "My 4 p.m. client is here." The American looked at the 4 p.m. client, who'd arrived at 3:55 p.m. and was waiting patiently. The American said, "Maybe they can wait?" The 4 p.m. client said, "I arrived on time specifically, so I wouldn't have to wait." The American said this was bureaucratic nonsense. The stylist said this is respecting everyone's time equally. The American asked if there were any openings later. The stylist checked. "Tomorrow, 3:30 p.m., the American said. "I'll be here at 3:25 p.m., the stylist said. "Please arrive between 3:25 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. Not before 3:20 p.m. My previous client will still be here. I work at a Munich train station information desk." An American asked when the next train to Berlin was. I said, "Platform 7, departing in 4 minutes. He said, "Which platform?" I repeated, "Platform 7. He said, "Where's that?" I pointed. He said, "How far?" I said, 2-minute walk. He said, "Can I make it?" I said, "If you leave now." He asked about tickets. I said, "There's a machine on the platform." He asked if he needed a reservation. I said, "Not for this train, but you need to board before departure." He kept asking questions. I kept checking the clock. 3 minutes until departure. He asked about luggage rules. 2 minutes. He asked if they served food. 1 minute. I said, "Sir, the train leaves in 60 seconds. Platform 7. He said, Okay, I'm going." I watched him walk, not run, toward platform 7. 45 seconds. He stopped to check his phone. 30 seconds. He looked at the departure board. 15 seconds. He reached the platform. The doors closed. He knocked on the window. The train pulled away. He came back. "I missed it," I said. "Yes." He said, "Why didn't you tell me to hurry?" I said, "I told you it left in 4 minutes. "That was 4 minutes ago," he said. "Can they stop it?" I said, "It's a train, not a taxi." He said, "When's the next one?" I said, 1 hour. Platform 7. I manage a small theater in Heidelberg. Performances start precisely at 7:30 p.m. Doors close at 7:28 p.m. An American couple arrived at 7:33 p.m. They had tickets. The doors were locked. They knocked. I opened the door slightly and whispered, "The performance has started." The husband said, "We have tickets for tonight," I said, "for a 7:30 p.m. show." "It's now 7:33 p.m., the wife said. "So let us in." I explained we don't allow entry after the performance begins. It disrupts other guests and the actors. The husband said we paid €90. I said, "For a 7:30 p.m. performance." The wife said, "We got lost," said, "That's unfortunate. But the performance still started at 7:30 p.m. The husband said, "This is insane. In America, they'd seat us." I said, "This is Germany. They don't." He demanded a refund. I explained the tickets were non-refundable, and the terms clearly stated late arrivals wouldn't be admitted. The wife said, "What are we supposed to do now?" I said, "We have a performance tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. I can exchange your tickets," the husband said, "tomorrow." "We leave tomorrow," I said, "Then I recommend arriving at 7:20 p.m. tonight's date next time you're in Germany." The wife said, "This is the most inflexible thing I've ever experienced." I said, "This is respect for 200 people who arrived on time." They walked away. Through the door, I heard applause from inside. Perfect timing. The opening scene had just concluded. At 7:30 p.m. exactly as scheduled. Working in Germany teaches you that punctuality isn't about being rigid or cold. It's about respect. When everyone follows the schedule, everyone's time is valued equally. The American approach, flexibility, accommodation, customer is always right, sounds nice until you realize it means whoever complains loudest gets priority. German punctuality is fairness systematized. It's democracy applied to time. If you want the next episode, the one where Americans discover German directness, put yourself on the list. Subscribing means you never show up late to the conversation. Next time, I'll share stories about Americans discovering that German direct communication isn't rude, it's efficient. If you thought punctuality was shocking, wait until you hear about the feedback culture.